This add-on turns your Anki experience from simple reviewing flashcards to something more like having a tutor which helps you out with every new word and sentence you make. Flashcard and spaced repetitions are a great way to expand your vocabulary in a target language or to learn a large amount of information. And there are some apps which are free and allow you to do that, for instance, Anki. The issue with these apps, at least what I found to be an issue for me, is that oftentimes they just ask you to click a button, and so you're not really thinking too much. You are in auto mode where you sort of recognize the word and go on. And this is not an effective way to learn. If you want to learn, you have to use your brain. And so I thought, could we use AI to build something that forces me to use my brain and think? And so I came up with a free Anki add-on which does exactly that. It requires you to write a sentence in the target language using the translation of the shown word, and then it gives you immediate feedback. It comments on grammar, on fluency, it gives you extra examples, and it also allows you to start a chat about that particular topic. And that, I believe, is a great way to transform flashcards. Let's go back to step one. Why are flashcards so effective? They are based on what Ebbinghaus discovered more than a century ago, and that is the forgetting curve. Essentially, the longer it passes, the more we forget about something we learned in the past. And what happens is that every time we repeat, we are actually strengthening that memory. And so we can wait longer for another repetition. Based on this concept, there are a lot of tools that were created to try and optimize the intervals so that you repeat just before forgetting the concept. And in this way, you get the least amount of work and you maximize the effect. Anki does this, but of course you can simply use pieces of paper and then organize them based on how easy it was for you to answer them. The issue with this app is that they rely on your discipline. So if you are bored and you are not really thinking through about the answer of a flashcard and you just say it was easy, that's a bad signal. And at the same time, it's very easy to do repetitions without really using your brain. You are just thinking of a translation, you're not really using the word, and that's less cognitive load, and using your brain is what makes you learn stuff for real. The ideal way to use an app like Anki would be see the card, maybe say out loud a translation, say out loud a few sentences using it, and then checking if you got it right.
Hola, ¿cómo está?
Now, this is an improvement because you're using your cognition, you're creating sentences, and you're also articulating sounds, which requires more cognitive load. But at the same time, one thing is lacking. You are not getting a feedback. Nobody is correcting you if the sentence you made is completely wrong.
Do I say como está or como estás?
And so I realized that more and more when repeating new words and creating sentences, I was ending up using LLMs to get some feedback on the sentences I was writing. And that's when it clicked. I could make this process automatic. What does the add-on do? Well, it's pretty straightforward. You get the front of your card and underneath you get a text box where you can write a sentence. You write a sentence, send it, and then you get a feedback. The feedback comments on fluency, on wrong words, on grammar, and gives you some examples. And what happens next is that you can actually go on. If I made a mistake, maybe I will try to build another similar sentence where I try to rectify on this mistake. Or if I see that I got wrong some other word, I can ask about that other word. And this is very effective because you're going in depth. You're not just skimming. The other advantage is that you still retain the normal functionality from Anki. So you can still see the back of the card without writing. This can be applied to any deck. So it's just an extra functionality. It's an extra. It's not something you have to use or do every time. Using it, I've actually discovered a number of mistakes because while the LLM is not perfect, it's pretty good at catching especially beginner level mistakes. The advantage is that having immediate feedback helps you see patterns in the mistakes you make. For instance, I've noticed that in Spanish, I almost always mix up the verb estar and the verb ser, which both translate to the verb to be, but are used in slightly different contexts. You also get an indication of awkward wording or fluency, which is not always perfect, but most of the time is good, especially, again, for people who are beginning or, intermediate, and so do not have that feeling that comes after you've practiced the language for long. And using it, you will not only learn new words, but you will also find, systematic errors, awkward wording, and moreover, you can actually adjust the difficulty at will. So when you're beginning, you could just say something like the ball is red. As you progress, you're free to write sentences using more complex structures or different tenses. It's a great tool which adapts to your input. Now, to all the haters, to everyone saying LLMs hallucinate, make mistakes, I will reply with, yes, you're right. But that doesn't mean there is no value in this tool. First of all, AI have developed a lot since the first ChatGPT, and their ability to handle language and fluency grew significantly. So they are not perfect, but the average quality is pretty good. And nowadays, even local models are pretty good when it comes to language, grammar, fluency. So most of their answers are okay. And since we know they are not perfect, we can also act on this. So if they say something weird or something is important, we can always double check on a grammar book. The real advantage here is that you have an instant answer, which most of the time is pretty good. Meaning wherever you are, even if you have a short amount of time, you will get valuable feedback. And even if you cannot afford a teacher every day, you still can get, the feedback there. And then maybe once a week, you can go to your language teacher and work on the things which are not clear. So the value proposition here is to have good feedback anytime, quickly, for free. This is an extra which can help a lot of people. Then, of course, to learn a language, you will need teachers, you will need practice with real people, and that's another subject. I also want to make a short note about AI and learning. A lot of articles have come up recently, the most famous one being Your Brain on ChatGPT. What they show is that when you're learning, if you let the AI do the work for you, you will not learn as well, which is sort of expected. I mean, there's a saying which goes like, use it or lose it, and that's exactly the point. If you are using the AI to do the work instead of you, you will unlearn how to do that work. And what I think that this AI helps, and I've seen in what I do, it helps a lot, is that it helps you separate the use of AI from your work. You get your time where you're forced to use your brain, and then AI is used to evaluate your feedback and give you hints on that. So I think that the trick is to separate the use of AI from the use of your brain. And this add-on does exactly that. You have a first forced time to think and work, and then you interact with the AI getting a feedback. I think this is the key. You are not using your brain less, you're using your brain more, and you're also checking on how well you use it. That, I think, is a huge value for free. Finally, I've said it's free for a lot of times. How is it possible? Well, for a number of reasons. So first of all, if your machine is powerful enough, you can use local models. I think Gemma 4 by Google is a pretty good model at language, and it's what I use when I want to use a local model. But you don't have to use your local machine. There are some APIs which have a free tier. So for instance, NVIDIA and Google offer some models for free. These APIs have very low limits, which are like 30 requests per minute. But you can see how if you are chatting and learning, 30 messages per minute are more than enough. So in my experience, I love using Google Gemini Flash or Flash Mini because they are super fast and they are pretty good linguistically. Locally, I use Gemma 4. And on NVIDIA, they also have the Gemma models and the DeepSeek models if you want something bigger. They tend to be a bit slower, but they do the tricks. On a side note, oftentimes flashcards are used for coverage, essentially. You try to repeat as many words as possible. Here, using this add-on, you're trying to go more in depth. It might take even a minute to fully review a new word, but you will learn it in a better way, you will learn the language surrounding it, its usage. So I don't see this as a replacement, but rather as another way to use flashcards. I also try to calibrate the repetition distance based on the work I did, because of course, if I absolutely don't get the meaning of the word, if it's wrong, then I will of course tell Anki that, to repeat it again. But if I get the meaning right, but the sentence is a bit wonky, I will still tell Anki that I did great, because of course I didn't fail at the word meaning, but at this extra exercise, which I'm also doing together with learning new languages. To install this tool, use a standard Anki installation, then go to Tools, Add-ons. Once the plugin is completely released, I will write down in the description. You will be able to write the code here or find it using Browse Add-ons, but at the moment you have to download the file and then choose Install from File. There is this AI Language Tutor add-on, open, and this will install it. Then we will have to configure it, because by default it is off. So this is the basic configuration. There is the first page, which is AI providers, essentially what models are you using. Olama is the default one. What I really like is actually Gemini. Here you have to create the API key. To create the API key, you will have to go to the Google AI website and create one in the free tier. Once it's written, you just save it. Decks, this is a deck I downloaded, and what's important is to write here the source language and the target language. The source language is the language you speak, and target language is the language you want to learn. What's important here, you have to enable the AI review, and with apply to subdecks it will cover also all the subdecks. Okay, you can see English, Spanish. I have to enable this, I have to save it. Here we have the front of the card, which is car, and then it is inviting us to write a sentence. The word for car in Spanish is coche, so let's write a sentence with this word. Okay, as you see, the sentence was correct, so it didn't add anything, and it just gives me some examples. Okay, so I made this very simple sentence, which is probably wrong, but I want to see. Let's see the review. So, antemano de is incorrect. De antemano. Necesito is misspelled, and I can ask a follow-up question. So you can see here I got the feedback, and essentially even te llamo de antemano is not really correct. I should use antes as my standard go-to word, and antemano is a more advanced word used for gratitude. So what are the limitations? Well, first, to install it, you will need some work. I will make an in-detail video for that, but there is no way to get around it, because you need to install an Anki add-on and you need to configure at least one LLM. The second limitation, of course, is feedback quality. It is on average good, but it's not perfect. And the last one is that, at least for now, it works only on desktop computers. There's no mobile version of this. So that was it. A free add-on to max out your learning experience with Anki. I hope you like this video. I'm here listening. If you have suggestions about features or things you'd want to see, I'm all ears. Also, please tell me if you would like me to develop an app which does this without all the complex setup. I have more ideas about using AI to really improve learning in languages and not only. So please subscribe if you are interested into these self-projects, or if you want to see how I will try to use this to learn a new language. I'm working on that. Thank you for being here. Ciao!